Sabbe satta bhavantu sukhitatta bhavantu sukhitatta.
Hello, I'm Dave Jacobson, and I'm here now with the 5th episode of Nibbana, the secret treasure of the Buddhas. So, why is it a secret? Because, as we went over last time, everyone is thinking of the world in terms of things. And things mean name and form, nāmarūpe. Nāmarūpe is an abstraction. A name is nothing but a semantic tag attached to a series of impressions of an object. Sense impressions, sense consciousness. This is all external to the being. It's all a symbol of experience. It's not experience itself. As we pointed out last time, real experience is non-conceptual, non-verbal, and it is the direct contact of the senses with the object. But we hardly ever experience direct experience. We almost always live in a world of symbols and names and forms. So the meditator tries to penetrate through this realm of name and form down to the immediate experience, the direct experience of the object. Sometimes this happens spontaneously. For example, when we're really absorbed in something, when we're really paying attention, when we're spontaneously, or sometimes when we're surprised. Something will happen we don't expect, and boom, we're shocked into direct awareness. Or we're experiencing something extremely pleasurable that automatically concentrates the mind. And then for a few moments, we might be in a state of non-verbal direct perception, non-symbolic experience. But then again, the mind comes in and puts up this layer, this shield or filter of terminology, and we lose it again. How can we get to the actual experience of life? Sometimes it happens through practice. For example, an athlete, let's say, or a martial artist practicing their art for many years until it becomes so effortless, they become so expert that they can put the mind aside and just focus on their performance or on their art for the duration. So this is called being in the groove or being in the flow. A lot of artists have experienced it. A lot of athletes have experienced it while running, for example. Sometimes you get to where you're just running. You're not running for anything or because of anything or to anything or any other symbolic meaning. You're just running for the sheer joy of it. And that is real experience. So we're all attracted to that. We all want that. We all admire and even idolize people who have it or appear to have it, like artists, athletes, performers, actors, and so on. But do they really have it? Then why are so many artists and actors and musicians using drugs? Why are they having difficulty in their personal lives? And there's so many scandals you read about. This guy getting together with this girl, and then they break up, and it's big headlines of it. Why are they having so many problems? Because they are actually still in the world of names. Maybe they're able to break out of it for the duration of their performance. But then once they're off the stage or once they're off the field or whatever it is, they go right back into it again. So what we really need is a way to untangle ourselves from the verbal symbolic experience and rekindle our direct experience. And in the Buddha's teaching, this is called untangling the tangle. There's a tangle within, a tangle without. The world is entangled in a tangle. O Gotama, I ask you, who can disentangle this tangle? So this is a basic question asked by a seeker to the Buddha. So the problem is we look at things and even our suffering as being something objective, something out there in the world. And we don't realize that the world that we experience is actually within us. Like I said last time, try going without speaking for 2 or 3 days. I've only been here alone for the last 24 hours or so. And yet when I started to make this podcast, for a few moments I was awkward in my speech. Like, why? Because I had been living in pure nonverbal awareness. And then to come into speech again, and words and symbols, it seemed like an effort. So what is it about words and symbols that is so difficult, that drains us, that takes our life energy away from us, that makes experience kind of drab and flat and not as pleasant as when we're in direct experience? Well, it's because we have to maintain this view of a world. The actual world is within us, and it's largely a world of symbols. Like I quoted Descartes last time. I think, therefore I am. The I cannot exist without thinking about it. The I is a projection. It's a semantic construction. It's an abstraction. It's not real. And even if it were real, what we call real is actually just a symbol. Again, in Descartes' theory, Cartesian space is a three-dimensional, shared, objective reality. However, quantum physics has discovered, and this agrees totally with the teaching of the Buddha, that there is no such thing. There is no such thing as objective reality. There is no such thing as a shared world full of objects. No, each and every one of us has our own experience. And that experience, that reality, that world, is not disclosed until we pay attention to it, until we measure it, in the words of quantum physics. Until we look in the box, we don't know whether the Schrödinger's cat is alive or dead. That's the actual reality. The actual reality is simply potential. What could be, what might be, or what can be. Then, when we perceive it, we actualize it. And that's the world that we perceive. That's the world that we live in. It's based on our perceptions. Not that there's any kind of objective reality, because two different people will perceive the same thing completely differently, isn't it? They'll interpret it in a completely different way, and so it has a different meaning to each one of them. So this is why the reality seems to be a tangle. It seems that no matter how we try to disentangle what's going on, we always wind up all tangled up again, isn't it? That's because we're in the mind. And the mind is not an objective thing. The mind is totally subjective. So the Buddha says the aim of the meditator is to cut off the craving for this name and form. Why do we want to have this name and form? Because it gives us the feeling that I am. And as long as I am, we feel safe, comfortable. Oh yes, I and all of my things. But we don't realize that this is just an abstraction. It's just a projection of our mind. As we went over last time, the process of I-making and mind-making. So all this is given in the Satipatthana Sutta. You should read it. Satipatthana Sutta is a system of observation of the body and the mind. And to try to separate out the perceptions of the body and the perceptions of the mind from our thoughts about them and our awareness of them. So the Satipatthana Sutta recommends a system of meditation where we view each perception that comes into the mind without making any judgment whether it's good or bad, right or wrong, painful or unpainful, pleasant or displeasurable. We simply observe the impressions of the senses as they come into the mind. And then, a critical step, we observe our observation of those impressions, those perceptions. This is called meta-consciousness. In other words, we're not simply being conscious of our body and mind, we're being conscious of our consciousness of the body and mind. Now, this is a higher stage. Why is it higher? Because we separate our consciousness from our impressions. We separate our consciousness from our mind, and we separate our mind from the body, from our senses. So this is a type of meditation that actually leads someplace. You'll find many variations on this. Probably the best known implementation of this process is Mahasi Sayadaw's system. I learned this system while I was in Sri Lanka as a monk. And of course, there are many other forms of meditation, especially anapanasati, where you concentrate on the breath. But in this system, given in Satipatthana Sutta, you meditate on 32 parts of the body. One by one, you take a survey of the entire body. When I learned this, I realized, I've been doing this instinctively since I was a kid. The idea is, when we find some block, some tension, some interruption of the flow of energy and consciousness in the body, then by being aware of it in a certain way, we pierce through that obstruction. We clear the block. We disentangle the tangle that has manifested in that place. And then we find our enjoyment of life is much more enhanced. We find our health is greatly enhanced to the point where we don't get sick anymore. We find that our self-awareness, our self-acceptance, our self-love is increased tremendously. And just our experience of life itself. Well, why is that? Because we are untangling things that were previously tangled up. Before, we were all absorbed in our senses and mind, thinking that these things are real, these things are concrete, these things are objective. This is reality. Cold, hard reality. Well, there is no such thing. There is only how we interpret our sense impressions. That's our reality. That's our world. That is what we are actually aware of. So when we separate our sense impressions from our awareness and interpretation of our sense impressions, and then we separate our awareness, our consciousness, even from that, then we start to disentangle ourselves from these entanglements, these abstractions, these actually fabricated awarenesses that are mostly just symbolic, mostly just terminology, mostly symbols. So the Buddha is called the incomparable surgeon. one who removes the arrow of craving. And what are we craving? What are we lusting after? Actually, it's just name and form. We want to see certain forms. We want to hear certain names. We want to hear someone call us by some designation that enhances our ego. Oh, you're very intelligent. You're very beautiful or handsome. You're very strong. Oh, you're a very nice person, and so on. And we want to hear these names. Why? Because then we can say, I am these things. See? And this validates our I. Well, why does our I need validation? Because it's insecure. And why is it insecure? Because it's a fabrication. Like we went over last time. The I is a created thing. It does not exist by itself. We have to expend the effort to create it. And that's a significant effort over a long period of time to keep this thing going. Every impression that comes in, somehow or other we have to make it mine so that we can validate the existence of our I. Well, what if there is no I? What if there is no self? Just let it go. You'll be amazed at the relief you feel. And why is that? Because we're disentangling the tangle. See, if we go in search of I, we will inevitably find that our I is in relationship to the things we call mine. And if we start investigating this mine, we find that the objects, the things that we call mine, are actually only symbols presented to us by the senses. We're not perceiving things directly. We're perceiving them through a very conditional process. The information has been processed into symbols. And then we're perceiving only the symbol, not the thing itself. So what is really mine is actually only a symbol. My chair, my camera, my water bottle, my this, my that. But these are only names, symbols. They're not the actual things themselves. And the proof is that the thing can go away. And we still think that's mine. Isn't it? Somebody steals our car. What are you doing with my car? The car isn't even there. Right? In fact, the absence of something can be a much stronger and more profound impression than its presence, if we consider it mine. Where's my whatever? How many times have we called out to our friends, where's my car keys? Oh, where's my glasses? Where's my phone? Did you see my this? Did you find my that? Why? Because it's missing. We don't know where it is. If we don't know where it is, we feel like we don't control it. And if we don't control it, this undermines this idea of mine, which in turn undermines the idea of I. So we become insecure, we become desperate. Where's my such and such? Because I have to control this thing, I have to exert my will over it to feel that it's mine, to justify the existence of this I. See, it's a whole house of cards. That's why I made the figure of the Mullapariyaya Sutta in the shape of a triangle. Because the I at the top is dependent on all these things below it. And if any of them is missing, then we start to feel insecure. So acquisition and control, or possession and control or manipulation go hand in hand. They're part of the same thing, part of the same tangle. And we want to make this tangle. We want to obscure the fact that our I is a fabrication from ourselves and from others. We don't want anybody to know there's nothing inside. And when we get to the theory of vortex theory of ego, oh boy, we'll see there really is nothing inside. But that's coming in the future. So the Buddha gives an example of a person who's shot by an arrow. He says, if someone is shot by an arrow and he goes to the doctor to have the wound fixed, does he say, no, I'm not going to accept any treatment until I know the name of the person who shot the arrow and what his family background is and, you know, his political beliefs and so on like that, and who made the arrow and what kind of an arrow it is and so on? No, you're just going to say, Doc, get this arrow out of me right now. Isn't it? So then why should we be interested in the names of the things that have wounded us with attachment? Why should we be interested in the connections of all these things? You know, we see somebody at a party and, oh, whose friend is she? You know, what kind of outfit is she wearing? Is that designer clothes or is it just a Chinese knockoff? You know, how much money does she have? What kind of car does she drive? Is she cool? Does so-and-so think she's cool? Do all my friends think she's cool? Come on. This is nonsense. This is the world of names. This is not reality. This is something that we fabricate. And we spend tremendous effort in this fabrication. So when we see something in the outside world, we want to know all about it. That's useless. What we really should want is to not be attached to it, to remove the arrow. And the Buddha is the consummate surgeon who removes the arrow of attachment and craving from the heart. So we shouldn't wonder, we shouldn't speculate or be suspicious about the Buddha's motives. His motives are pure. He just wants to heal us. He just wants to save us. So let's get out of his way. Let him do his job. And his job is to untangle this tangle of name and form. And we shouldn't care about the name and the form. We should only care about the direct experience of the thing. That will lead somewhere. And where it leads, we'll see as this series progresses. We're going to take it one step at a time. So the first step is to untangle our attachment to these names and forms. To view our view of them. To observe our observation of them. To be conscious of our consciousness of name and form. To contemplate our attachment to name and form. And see how it's all a fabrication. And see how we can pry ourselves loose by metaconsciousness. By this Satipatthana method. So this is the reason why all of our efforts to heal our suffering by making arrangements in the external world are going to fail. They have failed. They are failing. And they will fail. They cannot succeed because the real cause of our suffering is in here. It's not out there. Simply by rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic, we're not going to stop it from sinking. So simply by changing the configuration of the objects that we're attached to doesn't stop the fact that we're attached. And that is the cause of the suffering, not the object, but not whether our car is clean. The fact that we're attached to our car, whether it's clean or dirty, we're still going to suffer. Because why? Someday that car is going to go away. Someday that car is going to be used up, finished. Or someday we're going to go away. We're going to have to die. And then we have to leave our car, our house, our friends, our money, our stuff, our body, everything behind. This is the cause of suffering. The fact that we are attached to these things, the fact that we're clinging to these things, we're craving, we're lusting after these things. One time the Buddha was asked, "Can you summarize your teaching in one sentence?" And he said, "Yes. One should cling to nothing whatsoever." So, the beginning of our freedom, our emancipation, our nibbana, is to see how we are attached to names and forms, designations and appearances, and to detach ourselves from them, not by force, not by an act of will, but by an act of consciousness, observing how we are attached to each of these things, and letting go of that attachment, not again by an act of will, but by an act of consciousness, by observing our observation, by being conscious of our consciousness of name and form. That's the first step on the way to Nibbana.
Sabbe satta bhavantu sukhitatta bhavantu sukhitatta.